Good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends, dear participants of our webinar. We've already discussed some of the main topics related to scholarly writing, editing, and reviewing. Today, we are going to continue discussing the rest of the topics included in our webinar program. And in my opinion, one of the main issues is ethical citations. So those who are going to write good articles should learn to perform comprehensive bibliographic searches and choose highly relevant citations, and citation behavior of scientific authors should be in line with recommendations of global editorial associations. Yesterday, we discussed these global editorial associations: International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, Council of Science Editors, Committee on Publication Ethics, and World Association of Medical Editors. So, main organizations or associations concerned with citation behavior of scientific authors presented here. You probably know that International Committee of Medical Journal Editors is the top global editorial association, and their recommendations are regularly updated, annually updated, and contain some important points: how to cite articles, how to validate references, and how to ethically cite scholarly articles. So you see that International Committee of Medical Journal Editors in their latest 2019 annual recommendations included points on references. So in terms of general rules or rules for referencing, authors should provide direct references to primary research articles whenever possible. So we'll discuss this point a little bit later, but for now I'd like to draw your attention that authors, when cite articles, should read these articles, should understand all points included in that primary article, and try to cite that article instead of citing secondary publications like reviews, citing this primary article. It will be clear in a minute. So there is also another important point in recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. References should not be used by authors, editors, or reviewers to promote self-interest. Yesterday, we discussed peer reviewer comments, how reviewer comments should be drafted, and I briefly mentioned that reviewers may suggest some additional references or suggest to replace old, outdated references, but in no case they are allowed to abundantly promote their own articles, suggest auto citations to their source, to their articles. So global editorial recommendations highlighted this point in their latest recommendation. Recommendations also tell us that to minimize errors, references should be verified whenever possible using either electronic bibliographic source such as PubMed or print copies. So we no longer use print copies of journals, particularly in the time of pandemic, and we should extensively rely on online bibliographic searches. So we should verify whenever possible, and journal editors should also try their best to validate all references in all articles or all sources included in reference lists of manuscripts. So it's a task for editors to carefully validate all sources cited in an article, in a submission to a journal. When we discuss journal issues, referencing issues, we rely on mesh keywords. During this webinar, I've mentioned several times highlighted the importance of medical subject headings or mesh keywords for bibliographic searches via Medline and via Scopus as well, because Scopus also processes Medline indexed articles and automatically processes keywords tagged in Medline indexed articles. So bibliography as a topic is a structured keyword, mesh keyword, and we may rely on searches via Medline using this structured keyword. Bibliography as a topic was introduced as a keyword in 2008, and it relates to scientific works, documents, other scholarly publications, and these documents should contain information about authors, scientific topic, and other pertinent information. When we analyze bibliography as a topic in the context of other mesh keywords, we pay attention to documentation, to information science, communication, media, publications. So all these keywords somehow relate to bibliography as a topic. If you pay attention to the rest of this slide, you can see that journal impact factor also relates to citation and citations and references. So if we cite articles, we may influence journal impact factors or other impact metrics, like impact metrics calculated on Scopus data, Scopus indexed articles. Over the past decades, the role of citations or reference lists have changed enormously. Why? Because initially or traditionally, citations were proposed to appropriately credit original research work or original ideas, original hypotheses. Authors were also required to cite primary sources or methodology articles in their methods sections to link their research design, their research article with previously established methods, tests, laboratory tests, or other methodologies. So when in our methods sections we cite previous articles, we link our research design or our methodology to previously established methods. We may also modify these methods and outline in method section of our research article that traditional methods is modified to meet current circumstances. Reference lists traditionally have been used to locate primary sources, primary articles, research, review articles, grey literature articles. So reference lists traditionally are used to link our article with existing literature. So these three main points are still valid in our times as well. But in our times, we see that the role of citations has been expanded because of online bibliographic database, existence and upgrades of online bibliographic databases, because of sophisticated anti-plagiarism systems, and because of many other innovations. So when we write articles, we credit previous sources. When editors select or pick reviewers, they pay attention to references cited by you, and they can navigate to primary sources, find contact details of authors listed by you, listed in your references, and contact them, invite them to analyze, to evaluate your research article. So be very careful when you, in your original research papers, when you list previous articles, relevant sources, be aware that journal editors may pick these references and may contact relevant reviewers. References are also used to analyze importance of your articles, novelty of your articles. Usually medical editors pay attention whether your reference lists include sufficient number of updated sources. Updated, so within the past 5-7 years. And they also may use a reference list to compare different articles. If there is similarity or reference lists, your reference list and already published articles reference list are identical, it may raise concerns of plagiarism. So be aware of that as well. Journal editors use this option to detect plagiarism, even if your texts are paraphrased, are carefully written, are carefully worded. But if there is similarity of your reference list with already published references in an article, concerns of plagiarism may arise. Citations are also used by bibliographic databases, and I mentioned yesterday that citations are tracked to rank academic institutions and universities, particularly Scopus-based citations. If you publish articles, and these articles are cited by other articles indexed by Scopus, prestige and weight of your article increases. But at the same time, it helps to increase a rank of your university, because currently operating ranking systems like Shanghai system, Times Higher Education system, and QS World University rankings are oriented towards Scopus-based citations. Citations are also used to map the most influential articles based on a number of citations. We call this type of analysis citation classics. So authors may analyze top 10, top 100 highly cited articles based on Scopus or Web of Science database searches. And yesterday, again, we experimented with ranking citations, and we noticed that highly cited articles are those published in top scientific journals or top evidence-based medical journals like Lancet, British Medical Journal, New England Journal of Medicine. And all these journals are highly recommended as sources for citations for top evidence-based literature. Citations are also used to calculate impact metrics, such as two-year journal impact metric, journal impact factor based on Web of Science, citation trackings, and also cite score. It's a citation metric or impact indicator based on 4-year window in Scopus database. So we nowadays track citations in Scopus and Web of Science. Large publishers also have systems in place to track citations to already published articles in their journals. Let's say Elsevier, Springer Nature they have citation alert systems. In real time, they track these citations coming to articles published by their journal. So it's also important, and this type of tracking is useful for research cooperation, expanding research network, scholarly research networking, based on, let's say, ResearchGate platform. ResearchGate platform is a scholarly networking platform for tracking citations to our articles, for networking with scholars working in the same field. And this platform also tracks citations coming from various sources, not just Scopus Web of Science, but also tracked by Dimensions, Google Scholar, and other platforms. Scientific authors should know about two main systems, styles of referencing. First of all, for medics, it's important to know about Vancouver style, which is acceptable by International Committee of Medical Journal Editors when we cite articles in text and list these citations in reference lists in chronological order. And in square brackets, we list number of references listed in the reference list, number of articles listed in the references. So it's clear, and we use Vancouver style in most medical journals. But there is also Harvard style. Harvard style is different from Vancouver style of referencing, more acceptable, more useful for social sciences, humanities, arts and humanities journals. And in this case, articles or references are listed in text, in again in brackets, and in brackets we list first author of references and also year of publication. So if there are several articles by the same authors, we may list these authors in text by adding A, B, and C, A, B, C, etc. So Harvard style is rarely used by biomedical journals, but there are some publishers still sticking to this style of referencing. You simply should know these two main styles of referencing, and we also rely on both styles when we write, let's say, extensive review articles. We may combine these styles when we draft our articles, but when we submit our articles, we stick to journal recommendations, journal instructions, suggesting us to use either Vancouver or Harvard style. How we cite web resources? It's a difficult task because we should collect information about authors. We should take URL of web source, last update of that source. We should find out on the website last date of update, because web pages are also updated, date of our access, and exact URL, web link, or digital object identifier of that web link is available, if available. There is evidence suggesting that web links of well-established journal sources like BMJ, Lancet last longer compared to local regional journals. So there is some difference between well-established websites, well-controlled websites, and local regional websites, which are not lasting. So lifetime of web pages also differ. So we should first of all cite web links that supposedly are posted for a long time. So we should rely on reliable web links. Otherwise, our readers, after half a year, 1 year, 2 years, may miss these, miss these links. So be very careful when you cite web sources. Examples of web citations: we usually are advised to cite reliable sources, let's say from Web of Science, or blogs of established journals like BMJ blog, Lancet blog, Nature blog. These established websites have reliable web links, web sources like blogs. Blogs are considered as social media, and sometimes we also may cite social media sources. But again, we should pay attention to reliability of web links, or availability of digital object identifiers of these resources. Here I present one of the examples of published articles by our moderator. And you see in this article, I noticed that there were several or numerous web links to local or Eastern European web links. So this is why we, in the process of validating these references, we asked to add date of access to these sources and date of last update. So these type of web links should be properly validated, and it's a task of journal editor to ascertain date of last update and date of author's access. How we cite references. I mentioned about Vancouver style, and here is an example of Vancouver style. Even in one sentence, if there are more than one ideas discussed, we should properly link ideas to relevant references. So you see in this article, in this sentence, microalbuminuria and mean platelet volume are associated with hypertension, etc., etc. So there are two ideas. So one, or scientific facts. So one relates to microalbuminuria, and second to mean platelet volume. If there are different ideas, each one should be linked to a specific reference. There is also another rule when we cite sources, we should rely on scientific facts or evidence, and each scientific fact should be accompanied by at least one reference. We should also avoid citing multiple examples of the same reference. So if one scientific fact, we can cite 1 to up to 3 articles, up to 3 references. Another option of citation, when we see several articles linked with one scientific fact, and these references are to chronologically different items, we should list them in chronological order. So old references should be listed first, and newest or updated references last. I strongly encourage authors and journal editors to stick to these recommendations from reputable open access publisher, Biomed Central, London-based publisher, and their main recommendations suggest that any statement in manuscript or scientific fact should relies on external sources should use a citation. But I mentioned that there is no need to use multiple examples of the same similar references. Authors should avoid citing references that they are not familiar with. So they should cite only those references that they read and they know about all points listed in this reference, in this article. When we process hundreds or thousands of articles, let's say for systematic reviews, for narrative reviews with extensive reference lists, we may rely on reference managers. Like EndNote, it's a service of Clarivate Analytics, and it's a proprietary service, but there are also free services like Zotero and Mendeley. These reference managers can be used to organize your references, to format these references quickly. I'm well aware that Zotero is extensively used by my fellows, Indian fellows, who also publish numerous narrative review articles, and it's quite handy, quite helpful for them to use Zotero and change format of their articles. When they receive, let's say, rejection in one article, they submit the same article to another journal with another formatting requirements. It's easy to use Zotero for changing format as well. So Mendeley is also a source of reference manager, but at the same time, it's a bookmarking service tracked by altmetrics.com, and it's used also as social media. So for social networking, for expanding research collaboration. So it's a sophisticated service, Mendeley, part of Elsevier. And probably some of you are aware with the functionalities of Mendeley services. Here is an example of citations to COVID-19 famous article from China. And we see that not just citations to this article, but also alternative metrics, alternative attention metrics are counted, let's say, by altmetrics.com. Another example where I'd like to show how Mendeley reference bookmarkings are counted, are tracked, and are used. Let's say here is example of EULAR, or European rheumatology recommendations, and Altmetrics attention score, more than 200, mainly based on Twitter activities, tweets. but on altmetrics.com, we also track attention of those who use this article, read and bookmark on Mendeley platform. We see that here 136 Mendeley users bookmarked these recommendations for reading and future citations. So I also know that Mendeley counts here more than 130 often predict current citations tracked by dimensions or Google Scholar. So it's an example to show how we operate, how we experiment with different established and emerging metrics. Zotero is one of the best and, in my opinion, free reference manager, freely available. You can use it, and it allows to organize your references. And as a best reference manager, it allows to store PDFs of article and then use these articles to organize your local library. The same way, Mendeley also allows you to organize your own individual library and work with primary articles. So these reference managers are quite helpful for PhD candidates who are going to work with literature over 2-5 years, and they need their individual library to work with primary sources. A message to non-Anglophone users, literature, who use literature. I have evidence that non-Anglophone or Brazilian authors, when they publish articles in their local journals, they abundantly cite their local references, but when they submit a reference to international journal or English journal, they usually avoid citing these local references. So there should be balance between local and international sources, and references should be retrieved from databases, PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, and specialist databases. Citation patterns different across countries and across disciplines. Let's say arts and humanities specialists usually cite more references in an average article compared to nursing specialists or mathematics specialists. So rheumatology specialists stand somewhere in between. I analyzed this citation behavior in 2014 based on SCImago journal and country rank evidence. I have this evidence and I already published this evidence. References and citation styles are usually based on recommendations from American Psychological Association, and I strongly encourage journal editors to familiarize themselves with manual style guides. There is Chicago Style Guide used by employed by Council of Science Editors, American Medical Association Style Guide, and American Psychological Association. APA style is also acceptable for International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. So International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has its own recommendations. And again, I hope that you will read their recommendations and pay attention to these 4 points. Authors should provide direct references to original primary sources. References should not be used to promote authors, reviewers, and journals. It's considered as an unethical behavior. They should not use unpublished sources, and references should be properly verified. We also rely on Council of Science Editors recommendations, telling us how to avoid coercive citations, to avoid auto citations in editorials. Some editorials are apparently used to boost journal impact factors. Recommendations also tell us how to avoid self-citations and how to avoid so-called friendly citations. Let's say we cooperate and we cite articles of our friends, collaborators, and expect the same from them. It's also considered as unethical if sources, articles are cited out of context, or these citations are irrelevant, mechanical. So be very careful and rely on guidance of Council of Science editors. I hope that all participants of our webinar are aware of DORA declaration on research assessment, and journal editors may also easily become signatories of this initiative, DORA initiative. One of these points of this declaration tells us that we again should cite primary sources and avoid citing secondary sources, secondary publications. So cite original research papers instead of review articles. And we should not use journal impact factor of a journal to evaluate individual articles or promote specialists who publish, let's say, in Lancet, BMJ, and other journals. Let's say I'm well aware of scientists who publish global reports in Lancet with kilo or 1,000 authors and submit these articles for promotion. It's unclear why they submit these articles. They use journal impact factor of Lancet to boost their profile, but their academic contribution is minimal in this type of articles. So there is no need to use journal impact factor, 2-year journal impact factor, for academic promotion purposes. Reference validation is done by different publishers variably. So one of the examples is in expert opinion review journals. They ask authors to tag, to highlight articles of importance, of great importance, marking with 1 asterisk or 2 asterisks. So this is also a type of validation. When we or authors to use format of citations. So some journals, let's say International Journal of Preventive Medicine, I was involved in this journal first issues in when 10 years ago, when this journal was established, and we decided to help authors to cite articles by suggesting format of citations and abbreviation format, which should be also based on strict standards, international standard, ISO standard 4. So abbreviation of journals are also important for proper citations to avoid mistakes, technical mistakes. Here is an example of citation manipulation, citation swapping in Clinic Brazilian journal. This journal lost its impact factor because of multiple unethical instances of citation swapping and auto citation. So this article with extensive auto citations, journal auto citations, was retracted, and journal itself was punished by Web of Science, by Thomson Reuters, and lost its impact factor for 2 years. We may increase visibility of our articles by increasing reference lists. It's a initiative, also very useful initiative, particularly for subscription journal, but in the era of open access, most reference lists are open for open access. So we gradually moving from subscription journals to open access journals. Citation alerts are useful practice by large publishers, and hope that small publishers or medium-sized publishers will also rely on citation alerts. Now about recommended and non-recommended citations, references. So we'll discuss these citations a bit later, but for now, just avoid citing sources lacking evidence base, lacking visibility, lacking digital object identifier, or YouTube video articles published just for promotion of drugs, medical technologies, or retracted items. We may also cite unpublished or non-peer-reviewed articles posted on prestigious preprint services like medRxiv or bioRxiv, SOSarchive, but it's up to our authors. It's at their discretion, so they can cite these sources, these articles posted on these preprint service if they are sure that methodology, validity of these articles is in place. So, any questions up to this moment? Any comments? Please send. So, you know now everything, almost everything about citations, ethical citations, referencing patterns in different countries, in the context of different academic disciplines. I'm open to questions, comments. If there is any comment, please come forward and ask or send your questions, comments to our moderator.
Dear Armen, thank you very much for your excellent and very useful presentation. One question to you. How instruction for authors should be amended to incorporate main points on citations?
Okay, excellent and quite practical question. So journals, particularly in Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, should regularly revise and update their instructions for authors, and they need to pay attention to citation parts. So, and these parts in their instructions for authors should be based on updated recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors and Council of Science Editors. There is no need to boost citations by asking to increase number of articles in number of cited sources, or to manipulate citations by other tricks. Simply, in citation parts, you should advise your authors to rely on comprehensive bibliographic searches and provide some links, specific links to recommendations where authors, potential authors, can find relevant information. Other questions, comments?
Thank you very much. And let's move on to the next lecture. One of the most important lecture, how to write articles for scientific journals, for rheumatology journals.
So not just for rheumatology, but also to other journals. So perhaps it's a main part of our webinar, how to write articles for peer-reviewed index journals. Main purpose of this part of presentation, to familiarize with some of the main research reporting standards, highlight again the importance of systematic approaches to bibliographic searches, present a point on ethical authorship and citations, again discuss acceptable and unacceptable citations, and briefly about impact indicators based on traditional citations and alternative metrics based on social media. So we rely on editorial guidelines. Here, I'd like just to add points about Equator Network and European Medical Writers Association. Usually, novice or non-Anglophone authors rely on editing support, external editing support, and because of lack of English writing skills, because of lack of statistical skills, and because of many other reasons. So they, novice and non-Anglophone authors, may learn a lot by visiting European Medical Writers Association and reading or consulting freely available, openly available sources on their main web page, particularly on the web page of Medical Writing Journal. So again, we have two main recommendations, and we rely on these recommendations from International Committee of Medical Journal Editors and Council of Science Editors recommendations. Recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors tell us about authorship criteria. We discussed this criteria, we discussed ORCID IDs, importance of ORCID IDs, and I hope that all our participants will have ORCID IDs and will use these IDs in their future manuscripts submitted to peer-reviewed journals. They should also avoid predatory journals, use statistics properly, and should also rely on proper references, ethical references, well-validated, evidence-based references. International Committee of Medical Journal Editors also advises to use conflict of interest forms from their website. And again, authors, reviewers, and editors should disclose their conflict of interest by filling these forms, submitting to journals. And I think that it will be easy for most participants to meet these requirements of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Journals fulfilling standards of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors may claim that they adhere to their recommendations and submit information about their journals. You see that a number of rheumatology journals, indexed and non-indexed, already claimed that they adhere to updated recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Now about influence of review articles, primarily narrative, non-systematic review articles. These are well-read, well-promoted, and usually attract a lot of citations, more citations compared to small letters, short communications, and original research papers. Narrative reviews are well favored by large publishers, good publishers, because they increase readability of the whole readability or downloadability of articles on websites of these journals. Highly cited, contain information about practitioners. We have different types of review articles. Even editorials can be also viewed as mini reviews, and some journals also publish editorials as reviews. It depends on number of references, depending on number of references in reference lists. So, but we usually deal with the narrative reviews and quantitative review articles. So quantitative means systematic reviews with meta-analysis. Systematic reviews are those based on review protocols registered with Prospero Registry. We'll discuss this Prospero Registry a bit later. Now, narrative reviews, non-systematic reviews should be also based on some standards, standards of searches, comprehensive and systematic searches through Medline, PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, and sometimes also specialist databases, DOAJ and specialist databases. In the time of pandemic and at the current stage, we often read hypothesis articles, and even these hypothesis articles should be structured based on standards. So structure of scientific hypothesis should include background information, specific knowledge on subject related to our hypothesis, and then hypothesis itself properly formulated, research design required to test our hypothesis. What type of research design? We can propose several research designs. Let's say cohort study, clinical trial, retrospective or prospective cohort study, or cross-sectional study, case control study. So it depends on what type of hypothesis we suggest. And then final part of hypothesis article should be about implications, clinical implications, practical implications, and mandatory ethical implications. Let's say if we propose vaccination, we should also remember about ethical concerns, how our hypothesis may affect subjects, whether there are any risks of our hypothesis or not. So each article type, even hypothesis article, should be based on certain reporting standards. And I hope that our participants writing hypothesis articles will also consult the following standard. One of the main journals in the field of hypothesis is Elsevier journal, Medical Hypothesis. And here is the example how we search through this individual journal in relation to rheumatology. This journal published 38 hypotheses related to the field of rheumatology, and one of the hypotheses is presented here. You can see this hypothesis. Title of hypothesis includes question mark. So probably conclusion of this article should contain an answer to this question mark. We usually rely on equator network standards. In terms of systematic reviews, all authors of systematic reviews should consult PRISMA checklist, PRISMA flowchart, and fill these checklist. Here is flowchart of PRISMA. We see that initially authors of systematic reviews retrieve thousands of articles from different databases. They are advised to present search strategy through, let's say, Medline, PubMed in detail, which keywords were used, datelines of searches, inclusion and exclusion, and then should present how similar or duplicate sources were excluded, removed, which other sources were excluded based on scope or aim of systematic reviews. And at the end, they should leave 10, 20, 30 articles that they are going to analyze based on PICO tool, patients intervention comparator outcome tool. I'm sure authors of systematic reviews are aware of PICO tool. Here is a standard for writing narrative reviews, which was published in Rheumatology International 2011. So these recommendations or algorithm for PhD candidates or authors of narrative reviews can be very helpful. They should know that they need access to different databases, Scopus, Web of Science, specialist databases to write influential review articles. Systematic reviews should be registered with prospective registry. It's called Prospero, York University Registry. And here are examples of differences. In the field of rheumatology, we have 433 systematic reviews registered so far. Some of them are still ongoing. Others are already published. In the field of rehabilitation, physical medicine and rehabilitation closely related to rheumatology, there are 84 systematic reviews, and in pediatric rheumatology, just one systematic review. Why we need to register systematic review protocols with Prospero? Just to avoid redundancies. We know about numerous Chinese systematic reviews. Some of them are redundant because they duplicate information already presented in other systematic reviews or narrative reviews. So to avoid this type of redundancies, it's better to register protocol of your systematic review with detailed information about search strategies, aims, outcomes of systematic review with Prospero registry. It's easy to register protocol, standardized form, online form, and it may help avoid redundancies upon publication of systematic reviews. Even practice recommendations of professional associations, I'm sure that rheumatologists in Central and Eastern Europe also publish a lot of recommendations. Let's say rheumatologists revise EULAR recommendations, and they need also to stick to right standard, which is acceptable to Equator Network. It's an abbreviation of essential reporting items for practice guidelines in healthcare, right standard. So again, checklist of this right standard is presented here. All most points easy to fulfill. Now, about titles of different articles, particularly narrative reviews. When we put question mark in the title, we attract attention of readers, and we are also obliged to provide an answer to this question mark in conclusion of our review article. So some editors and reviewers, I personally also suggest to revise, to correct titles whenever possible, to help authors to publish their articles with attractive and accurately formulated titles. Let's say for original research papers, we always ask to adhere to Equator Network guidelines, standards, STROB or consort, and ask to put study design in the article title. Let's say cohort study or retrospective prospective cohort study, case control study, randomized controlled trial, etc., etc. Here is an example of an influential review article written and published in Lancet journal. You see search strategy. An example of search strategy for these authors based just on PubMed platform searches. It's acceptable to Lancet, particularly to well-known authors, experts in osteoarthritis. You see search strategy, keywords used, timelines of searches. They preferably analyzed search sources within the last 5 years. In medicine, biomedicine, 5-7 years is acceptable timeline. So this article is well cited. You see that dimensions track 44 citations. Altmetric attention score presented in the center of donut ring is 97. And you also see that numerous Mendeley users bookmarked saved PDF of this article in their individual Mendeley library. And hopefully, probably, all these bookmarks will transform into citations over time. Another example of good article with informative title with question mark. It's a systematic review based on searches through Medline. Sinahal is search platform for nurses, but it also based on the other specialist databases, Sport Discus for sport medicine specialists, for rehabilitation specialists. And this article is promoted much less because it's a specialist journal and specialist article with narrow scope of interest. So just 7 citations on dimensions and 15 tweets. All these metrics are aggregated and contribute to 10 altmetric attention score. And you also see it's not counted for altmetric attention score, simply listed on their platform. 41 Mendeley bookmarkings. So again, article PDF is bookmarked on Mendeley, and probably later on it will be also cited by users. There are different types of articles. I mentioned about interrogative article, title more acceptable to narrative reviews, but there is also declarative article. Let's say osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, just one word, one keyword title. Descriptive or neutral, more acceptable to article original research articles. These two, declarative and descriptive neutral articles, are also common types. All these article titles should indicate subject, should be short or concise, but at the same time informative, should incorporate keywords related to the subject of article, and should be attractive. Attraction comes from question mark, from buzzwords, let's say osteoporosis, or widely searched keywords. When we put question mark, we may increase downloadability of articles, and there is evidence for that. When we put geographic reference, let's say to an Eastern European country, Central or Eastern European, let's say Poland, Ukraine, we may diminish interest of authors who cite from other countries, let's say from other Anglophone countries. And they are interested in titles with more international, more generalized use. So here are examples from Ukraine. You see that articles are published in Polish journal, Wiadomości Lekarskie, journal which is often targeted by Eastern European and Slavic authors. You see that they put in the first title, they put a geographic reference to their country, and social media attention is low. Just one user tweeted. It means that attractiveness of this article for global audience, for Anglophone audience, is minimal or nil. How we structure articles? We simply should pay attention to abstracts, keywords from Mesh thesaurus. In introduction, we should justify novelty. We should divide our article into several major subheadings. And we should also pay attention to Medline, how we operate, how we work with sources indexed by Medline. We pay attention to mesh terms tagged by this journal article. So this trick is useful for PhD candidates. When they analyze literature sources prior to justifying novelty of their article, their topic, they should pay attention to mesh terms and find out which mesh terms they are going to use in their research. So each PhD candidate should know about 10 to 20 highly relevant keywords related to topic of their PhD dissertation. The same for other scientists who are going to work on something new topic. They should analyze previous articles, find out keywords tagged by mesh thesaurus, and reuse these keywords for comprehensive bibliographic searches. Which databases we should use for comprehensive coverage of literature? Of course, Scopus and Web of Science. Scopus and Web of Science are subscription-based databases, and I hope that your authors will have access to these databases via their universities, libraries, or individual access. There are also specialist databases. Medics frequently or on daily basis use Medline via PubMed. Pharmacists, pharmacologists, toxicologists use Embase. Cochrane Library, database of evidence-based sources, journals used by most specialists. Nursing specialists should have access to Cumulative Index to Nursing and Allied Health Literature, CINAHL, and I also suggest journal editors to index their journals with numerous articles of interest to nurses on CINAHL. CINAHL is a valuable database for specialist database hosted on EBSCO Information Aggregator. It's a platform with numerous bibliographic databases. One of these databases is CINAHL. So CINAHL and Medline and Cochrane Library databases are viewed as evidence-based databases, so remember about that. There is also Global Health for hygiene, specialists in hygiene, public health, toxicology. They can use this database, and again, journal editors may index their journal if they publish articles of interest to toxicologists, public health specialists, epidemiologists. PsycInfo is a database with strict indexing criteria similar to Medline, but specialists with narrow interest to psychologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists. Other specialist databases of interest to rheumatology and rehabilitation specialists presented here. SportDiscus, also hosted on EBSCO Information Aggregator. I hope that EBSCO information services are employed by most Central and Eastern European journals. DOAJ is a director of open access journals. We discussed this registry. It processes information from open access, ethical open access journals. More than 15,000 journals are now listed, registered with DOAJ. So we can use DOAJ for comprehensive literature searches as well, as a complement to Medline, Scopus, and Web of Science. Additional channels for searches, let's say British Library, traditionally used by British specialists, particularly those who have access to their catalog and library. They have print library of numerous journals. So if you still publish print journal, you may contact British Library and ask them to cover your journal as print copies as well, and send them print copies. ProQuest is a information aggregator, again, useful for PhD candidates, particularly in UK, England, because most British scientists use ProQuest for posting PhD dissertations, MD dissertations. So it's valuable source of dissertations, and not just the dissertations. Journals may also contact ProQuest services to aggregate information from their journals. The same with EBSCO. When we structure review articles, we should rely on at least two reliable, reputable bibliographic databases, let's say Medline and Scopus, or Medline and Cochrane database of systematic reviews. We may consider highly cited items. When I analyze references in manuscripts, as an editor, I pay attention to citations of cited articles. If most articles are non-cited, influence of these reference lists is low, so I may suggest authors to replace these poorly visible, non-influential resources by highly relevant, widely visible, and evidence-based sources. So these type of strategies are workable, useful. We should say deadlines. I mentioned about 5-7 years. We should not cite newspapers, magazines, non-peer-reviewed or retracted items, Congress abstracts. We may ask authors to replace Congress abstracts with full papers published based on these abstracts. It is not recommended to cite dissertations or annotations of dissertations. Instead, authors may choose to cite articles based on dissertations, articles published in reputable or peer-reviewed journals. So here is a list of unacceptable references, and we often recommend our authors to revise their references based on these recommendations. Again, if you are going to update your instructions for authors in journals, please stick to these recommendations. Provide link to this source, and your authors will mostly benefit from your recommendations. They shall avoid citing non-peer-reviewed magazines, non-digitized items without digital object identifier, promotional video films posted on YouTube, and retracted items. Where we shall submit our valuable review articles, of course, to Lancet and to top journals in our field of interest, let's say in rheumatology, in general medicine. We may also choose to publish editorials. Editorials are important, and I am sure that your journals also publish editorials in almost each issue, full issue of your journal. Case studies, case reports are often published by novice authors, by clinicians who frequently observe unusual case studies, case reports. Some PhD candidates may also publish case series or one case and analyze all similar case reports published so far and publish case-based review instead of case reports. Clinical reports or clinical case studies often considered as a basis of evidence-based pyramid, but sometimes these are very useful because they describe side effects of drugs or advantages of medical technologies. Some of these case reports may change practice guidelines and may help to discontinue unsafe drug marketing. Case reports, again, should be based on Equator Network standard called CARE. Case reports checklist is often used for drafting your case studies, case descriptions. And when you write case-based reviews, it is suggested to rely on CARE and not PRISMA, but narrative review standard presented here. So here's the example of case-based reviews. You see how it is structured based on PRISMA flowchart. Again, detailed description of searches through databases, exclusion of redundant or poorly accessible sources, irrelevant sources, and in this case-based review, 21 articles were analyzed for this article. Where to publish case reports? Most journals nowadays refuse to publish case reports except reports on COVID-19. Even small observations, small data on COVID-19 is useful, and regardless is journal instructions, these type of articles can be published on COVID-19. But of course, serious case reports can be published even in top journals like Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and British Medical Journal case reports. So how we structure original papers? Based on IMRAD famous structure: introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. In introduction, we are justify novelty, describe keywords. Please pay attention to keywords used for your studies. Avoid long epidemiological discourses and historic overviews. There is no need in introduction to pay more attention to extensive attention to history. In methods, describe only new methods or modified methods, and refer to already known methods, let's say DAS28 or HackScore. There is no need to provide details of these old methodologies. Simply provide link to reference, and that's enough. In statistical part, statistical analysis, describe how you checked, how you tested distribution of all parameters, normality, and then which tests, parametric or non-parametric, you used. Often we see t-test, student t-test for all studies, but in most biomedical papers with small sample sizes up to 100, it's advisable to rely on non-parametric or Mann-Whitney test. Of course, to correct for confounding factors, we should rely on a logistic regression analysis. We may also use sample size calculation prior to our studies, and we should report how we calculated our sample size. When we describe results, there is no need to stick to provide only p-values. We should also provide 95% confidence interval. In discussion section, it is desirable to pay attention to limitations. Let's say in observational research studies, common limitation is retrospective design, when we cannot check or confirm adherence to drug therapies, patients' adherence to drug therapies, or we cannot establish time changes of relationships between exposure and outcome in a strict way. So some of limitations of studies should be described. Even in narrative reviews, limitations can be posted. So let's say if you relied on just one database, Medline via PubMed, again, report this limitation and inform the reader that you wanted future studies, future reviews may be more informative based on more comprehensive coverage of literature, coverage of more than one databases. In footnotes, we provide information for journal editors. It is important to request funding from PhD candidates. It's important because funding also tracked by Web of Science. So if your journal is a candidate for Web of Science indexing, information about funding, grant funding is important. Even date and grant number is important to put in footnotes. ORCID IDs of all co-authors nowadays mandatory for most publishers, for most journals. So ask your authors to list all ORCID identifiers and integrate profiles of names of your co-authors with their ORCID IDs. And present authorship contributions in detail. We discussed credit taxonomy, detailed disclosure of author contributions, and also these contributions should be in line with International Committee of Medical Journal Editors for authorship criteria. And in acknowledgements, you can acknowledge non-author contributions. In terms of retractions, which are common in the era of open access because readers spot correctable or irreversible mistakes, I analyzed with my co-authors retractions in the field of rheumatology and noticed that some of them are due to honest, unintentional methodologic errors, data. Some are because of duplicate publication, technically or intentionally. Non-Anglophone authors often publish something in their Slavic language or other languages and then translate in English and submit to a higher rank journal. And of course, it's unacceptable, considered as duplicate or unethical, plagiarized, copied publication should be retracted if an instance of copying is surfaced. So there are other reasons for retractions. Plagiarism, we discussed plagiarism, but for now, I'm going to discuss cases related to bone studies, orthopedics, research, statistical errors, not just mistakes, minor mistakes correctable, but also major. Changing conclusions of your studies may result in retractions. Absence of ethics approval, so recheck at the start whether manuscript contain all ethics approvals with date of approval. So here is an example of plagiarized article. Article was published initially in one journal and then was plagiarized probably by inexperienced author who published this article in Medline Index Reumatismo Italian journal, and it was retracted, and retraction tells us that this article is based on violation of publication ethics norms because of the apparent plagiarism. So editors should check by authenticate by other platforms, should avoid plagiarism, and then should retract if they found that duplication or copying duplication means translated plagiarism is also a form of plagiarism, type of plagiarism. So here is an example of a serial plagiarist, an author, Dr. Bernardino Saccomani, Italian non-Anglophone author, who copied large chunks of literature in his numerous review articles. So journal editors, please pay attention to review articles. Primarily check review articles to avoid plagiarism of text. So this author published in Clinical Rheumatology, in Rheumatology International years ago, and when Authenticate was not in place for checking, and when Authenticate started to check, editors started to check, they found out that numerous review articles by the same author were plagiarized. So conclusions of this part relate to authors who should be aware of Equator Network standards, reporting guidelines. You will be also provided by some examples of these standards, CARE and PRISMA standards as a distribution material. So keep these standards for your future research activities, research and writing activities. Authors should also have access to Scopus, Web of Science, specialist databases, and should use searches through these databases. They should adhere to authorship recommendations, should disclose conflict of interests using International Committee of Medical Journal Editors form, and they should also be updated in line with global editorial recommendations. So thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to continue our cooperation, help you by advising you how to structure your articles, how to choose best target journals, and any other question relevant to our webinar can be also discussed afterwards. So now I'm open to quick questions.
Dear Armen, thank you very much for valuable and relevant information related to how to write articles for indexed medical journals. And we have a question probably from busy clinicians, because we also should remember about time management. Is there any artificial intelligence software to draft articles for authors?
Thank you. Good question. I am aware that there are authors who generate articles, so-called computer-generated articles, with input of artificial intelligence. Most of these articles come from China, and there are even so-called paper mills. Computer software generates articles, and authors simply put their names and submit to journals. As journal editors, we should be very careful when we process articles from China, from other countries, non-Anglophone countries, and we may also spot these type of articles generated by computer without any mistakes, without any linguistic mistakes, but too good to be true. We should pay attention to these well-edited articles and pay attention to articles coming from China as well, because they have numerous paper mills. So for novice and non-Anglophone authors, my main advice is to read top medical journals, read the articles regularly, process articles from well-established peer-reviewed journals, English journals, and learn gradually how to write articles in English. Even for non-Anglophone authors, it's important to write in their own words without using artificial intelligence services. So computer services or Google help not useful, not helpful for novice authors. Try to avoid this type of services. There is also another important part of authors' work. They rely on bibliographic searches. It should be done by skilled specialists. Any artificial intelligence can help to process literature from bibliographic databases, particularly for systematic reviews when we need to analyze thousands of articles. Sometimes it is necessary to involve information facilitator or librarian skilled to process, to retrieve literature from databases. But again, it's not the same. It's not something similar to artificial intelligence. It's just a contribution. Sometimes it deserves authorship credit, sometimes it just deserves acknowledgement, but information facilitators may help to retrieve relevant articles. Never rely, my advice to novice authors, never rely on artificial intelligence. Rely on your own skills, support of your research managers, information facilitators, and seasoned authors who are co-authors in your articles. Thank you.
What about some software programs like Grammarly, ProWriting 8? What is your opinion?
So primarily, Grammarly is a good software to check language and to avoid plagiarism. Yes, you can use, thank you for good point, Grammarly is useful for correcting language. But if primary first draft is poorly readable, even Grammarly software cannot help to rectify, to polish language in your article. So it takes time, it takes experience to improve writing skills in academic writing skills, and it is also very useful for authors to involve experienced co-authors who can correct. So experienced co-authors act as a Grammarly, as a substitutes for Grammarly. But of course, Grammarly helps to correct some technical mistakes, some suggest proper words. Grammarly is useful, but it also has its own limitations, and we should discuss Grammarly more in terms of plagiarism detection. You probably know that some research integrity editors like you, Alina, also use Grammarly to track, to detect plagiarism. Grammarly is good software, but it has its own limitations as well as any other software.
Yes, you are right. I use Grammarly every day. Well, you mentioned about plagiarism, and this is the next item of our agenda. Yes, probably one of the most important item. Yes, and your next presentation.
Yeah, I'll try to find out my. I should open slides. So, how to detect and how to prevent plagiarism. This part of webinar is particularly of interest, is of particular interest to novice authors who often copy and paste sentences and even paragraphs from other sources, and they sometimes they even provide a reference to primary source. It's even if you put reference to primary source, it's also considered as unethical practice. So you should read primary source, summarize information, put it in your own words, and provide reference to primary source to avoid claims of plagiarism, accusations of plagiarism. So which organizations concerned with plagiarism? There are two main organizations. One is US-based, ORI, or Office of Research Integrity, and second one, large global editorial association, Committee on Publication Ethics. I hope that all your journal editors, chief editors, are membering Committee on Publication Ethics. So all your journals should be represented on Committee on Publication Ethics, and you should adhere, journal editors should adhere to their flowcharts, recommendations, and updated core practices standards. When we define plagiarism, we refer to, first of all, to Oxford Dictionary, and it's a way of copying another person's words or work, scholarly work, and pretending that these works are our own. So it's considered as a source, as a form of piracy. So Council of Science Editors suggested its own definition of plagiarism, and it is based on evaluation of figures, images, and tables, not just text, but also graphics copying also, or unethical use of graphics without official permission from primary publisher, also considered as a source of plagiarism. So when we adapt graphics, we should provide a reference to primary source. So note about these definitions and avoid piracy, avoid stealing others' ideas without proper acknowledgement. One of the experts in the field of plagiarism, Dr. Roig, he mentioned that in addition to text and data copying, plagiarism also includes misappropriation of a wide range of others' intellectual property, including ideas, images, and methodologies. How ideas are copied and presented as something not copied, not something original. Let's say throughout peer review, reviewers evaluate someone's works, then provide negative comments. The article is put on hold or rejected, but ideas copied from evaluation are reused by these reviewers in their own articles or in articles of their fellows. So it's a source of concealed copying or plagiarism of ideas. So throughout peer review, reviewers should keep confidentiality. They should discard PDFs of articles they are reviewed, and they should not reuse unpublished ideas, should not reuse for their own interest. In terms of images, if authors reuse images, graphics, they should pay attention whether they have right to reuse this idea, these images, and it depends on copyrights of primary publisher. Sometimes it is necessary to go to a primary publisher and get official permission to reuse images in a new article. But if you have numerous copied, adopted article images with permission, it's also considered as a form of redundancy. So try to draw your own figures, take your own images, and avoid abundantly relying on already published images and other graphics. How prevalent is plagiarism? We don't have strict information because there is a lack of universally acceptable definition of plagiarism. Some consider plagiarism, textual plagiarism, when more than 4 and more than 4 words in a row are copied. So if you copy 4 words from somewhere, it may be considered as a plagiarism, textual plagiarism. Or if you copy definition of diseases, let's say rheumatoid arthritis, it's hardly possible to to define the same disease in your own words. Yes, it's possible to copy other words or present definitions which is published elsewhere, but it's an exclusion. Other than that, all sentences should be worded in your own words, should be properly paraphrased to avoid accusations of plagiarism. How we judge about prevalence of plagiarism? There was a survey based on honesty of surveys, respondents of this survey, and it appeared that 30% of those who were surveyed, they claimed that they witnessed plagiarism in articles of their fellows. But when asked about plagiarism in their own articles, only 1.7% claimed that they plagiarized in their published articles. So not all respondents are straightforward but about their own articles, but they may suggest their reports from their responses may suggest that 1/3 of articles may be plagiarized, may be copied. It may be a copying of ideas, it may be copying of texts, graphics, methodologies. We may also evaluate prevalence of plagiarism based on retractions, based on scientific misconduct. It's also a unique MESH keyword introduced in 1990. So we now know that there are more than 56 systematic reviews covering scientific misconduct. So plagiarism it's not a new phenomenon. It was prevalent throughout history of science. But in the era of open access, chances of detecting plagiarism are more. So plagiarism was also introduced as a MESH keyword in 1990, and there are less number of systematic reviews on this subject. We see that Miguel Roig, one of the top experts in evaluation for plagiarism, he published several articles indexed by Scopus, and he discussed self-plagiarism as well. So why self-plagiarism is important? American or Anglophone authors often are often invited to submit articles, and they may rely on their previous publications, previous texts. Because of lack of time, they may be tempted to copy some passages of text. So it's also considered as text recycling. It's also considered as unethical. So even in this case, they are advised to paraphrase, to use new wording, to avoid reusing, recycling redundant texts. When we process retracted literature, we may refer to Croatian experience, and I value high experience of my fellows, my colleagues from Croatian Medical Journal. It's a good journal, indexed by Medline, Web of Science, and Scopus with impact factor, more than one, and they have some retractions, and one of these retractions relates to plagiarism. This plagiarism comes from a novice specialist, Dr. Desa, who was not aware of plagiarism. He copied in his own article, and then he apologized for copying, and this article was retracted. So it's so-called unintentional plagiarism. So, intentional plagiarism is more serious misconduct and should be punished, whereas unintentional, because of lack of knowledge, lack of skills by novice author, it's less punishable, less serious misconduct, and the only way to correct literature is, of course, to retract published plagiarized article. Here is example how this specialist, Dr. Desha, apologized for copying, textual copying, and he I'm well aware of this case of retraction, and I know that it because of lack of writing skills by this novice author. So all cases of retractions are covered, discussed by Retraction Watch blog. It's quite influential blog run by Ivan Oransky. And we now know about several instances of retractions from Croatia, non-Anglophone country with exemplary standards of research reporting, but they also face some problems with retractions, and all these retractions are, of course, attract a lot of attention on retraction blog, and we and you as participants of this webinar should learn lessons from these retractions. Here is again plagiarist, serial plagiarist, who lost his publications, articles in Acta Medica Jugoslavica. It was published in 1974, and years later, in 2006, article was criticized and retracted because of research misconduct, and because it was also based on, probably because of lack of scholarly writing skills. So the same author, Asim Kubiak, also was criticized because of publishing numerous items, other items in the, he is also active in publishing textbooks. So textbook copying also a serious misconduct, though not well analyzed, well well explored. I know that in non-Anglophone environment, this is also one of the common types of plagiarism. So authors of textbooks should also draft their chapters using their own words, own graphics, own ideas. An example from Iran, also notorious example, well discussed, because it was an article by past vice president of Iran, immunologist Masume Ebtekar. Her article, she was a director of public health institution and head of Department of Immunology. And Masume Ebtekar, you can see this article published in Medline Index Journal, was retracted because more than 80% of this article was copied. So copy-paste written. It surfaced that this article was written not just by Masume Ebtekar, but her co-author, young, inexperienced author, who copied large chunks of articles, and all these articles were correctly referenced. So authors of primary articles, when read these published article, review article, they spotted that large chunks of their own articles were copied because it was also properly referenced. So article was retracted because of inexperience of the author who wrote review article. Again, review article, be very careful when you process review articles, journal editors. And scientific or research misconduct in this case was also because of denial of authorship. So Masume Ebtekar is listed as solo author in this article. There is no information about co-author, inexperienced author. So two types of misconduct: plagiarism and authorship denial. When we have evidence, again, from Iranian journal, Medline Index Urology Journal, Farokh Farokhi, one of the experts in public health, who analyzed 80 randomly chosen articles in their journal, Urology Journal. They noticed that more than half of their manuscripts had at least one plagiarized sentence. That's serious misconduct and punishable, not punishable, but journal editors could ask their authors to paraphrase to avoid even plagiarism of sentences. So it's also a source of plagiarism when you copy sentences without paraphrasing. Sources of or reasons of plagiarism. There are different reasons for non-Anglophone or inexperienced authors and Anglophone or Western authors. Usually Western users or American authors claim that they plagiarize because of lack of time. They simply copy their own articles, their own text, and they consider it as a norm. But again, it's not normal. It's considered as research misconduct and should be, the authors should be advised to properly write their articles in new words, new wording with properly formulated new sentences. But non-Anglophone authors usually claim that their English is very poor, so they thought it was better to use the words of someone senior to me or someone with better English skills. So both types of excuses are unacceptable. So non-Anglophone and Anglophone authors should learn how to avoid plagiarism. For non-Anglophone users, mostly plagiarism is because of copying words, text. For Anglophone, American-based specialists, it's more concealed, more based on copying ideas, methodologies, and concealed form of plagiarism, not apparent. So in any case, my advice to journal editors, when you process review articles, ask your authors to provide a disclaimer at the end of manuscript that no part of their manuscript, including graphics, ideas, were not copied or were not published somewhere else. It will help, it will spare your journal from publishing plagiarized items. So I told about intentional and unintentional plagiarism. Of course, intentional intellectual theft is a serious crime, is a serious ethical form of misconduct. Stealing ideas, methodologies from published sources, from peer-reviewed sources, stealing images or tables from open access sources, also unacceptable. Let's say when you draft slides for your presentations, be very careful and try to avoid copying even these type of items. Misappropriation of ideas also considered as intellectual theft. Unintentional, usually by inexperienced specialists, inappropriate paraphrasing. Sometimes inexperienced or novice authors copy text and they simply change words here and there and think that it's okay, it will be processed without any problem. No, even this type of paraphrasing, changing words, mosaic type of copying is unacceptable. So be very careful and avoid this type of plagiarism. And of course, any ideas, any scientific facts published somewhere and presented in your article should be linked with primary source. Proper acknowledgement to primary articles. How we cite, how we rely on referencing, we should use quotation marks when we copy word by word something, statements from our sources. Let's say others quotations, others ideas. So quotation marks should be used if we copy text word by word. Self-plagiarism or recycling, when we copy our own articles, our own text. Sometimes we also publish full papers based on our Congress papers. Abstracts can be the same in Congress abstract, in our full original research paper. If this type of thing happen, we should add note that the same material was published as a Congress abstract, and we should provide URL link or web link to primary source. This way we may avoid criticism of copying our own reports. So, but there is also another type of self-plagiarism when we publish several articles which are based on one small sample size. Let's say we can publish one article, and instead of that, we publish 10 articles and divide one research study into 10 small studies. It's called salami, when we cut one large study into 10 or more small articles. Probably this type of behavior is practiced by those who want to impress audience, impress readers with numerous publications, but it's not useful strategy. It's considered again as unethical. Opposite to salami is imalas, or augmented publications, when, let's say, PhD candidates, they publish 10 articles and they all in co-authorship with others, and they are required to publish at least one article with solo authorship. They collect information from all previous articles and publish augmented powerful article, one article at the end with solo authorship. It's also considered unethical because the same ideas were already presented in previous articles. Is there any limit to self-plagiarism or plagiarism? There are limits. Usually, journal instructions include some statements about limits of plagiarism. Let's say acceptable level of plagiarism is zero plagiarism, no any plagiarism. But if the zero plagiarism is not acceptable by some journals, they put 10%, 10, 20%. Of course, we should pay attention which part of article is copied. If there is copying in methodology part, it's acceptable to some extent. If it is impossible to describe methods in your own words, yes, you can copy methodology to inform readers about exact standard operating protocol, SOP. But other than that, everything should be written in your own word and authenticate. Similarity score should be minimal to avoid plagiarism. So, of course, if we see more than 30% textual copying, we should reject article without further peer review, without further consideration. How we detect copying? We usually rely on Google search. Simply, we put from manuscript one sentence, short sentence. We insert in Google window and search similar sentences in other published sources. And Google Scholar sometimes helps to retrieve articles containing these copied sentences. It's time consuming, but still it's free. There are other forms, let's say whistleblowing by colleagues. Lancet retracted, I remember one case, widely publicized case of retraction of article in Lancet because colleagues from the same department contacted Lancet editorial office and informed that their colleague copied their methodology and published article without acknowledgement. The article was retracted because of whistleblowing, but their anti-plagiarism system did not reveal that type of plagiarism. Plagiarism can be also reliably detected by Authenticate, which is widely publicized, widely promoted software used by Crossref. All members of Crossref may have access to Authenticate. Authenticate is the largest proprietary software, and it can help spot textual similarity. But after spotting textual similarity, editors should pay attention which parts were copied, whether it's methodology, introduction, discussion, or context of copying. Google Scholar provides free service to check small chunks of copied sentences you can use. No, it's freely available. Similarity checker. There are many free, openly available software on Google, so you can use this if you do not have access to Authenticate. How to detect image stealing? It's also easy. Google Images service allows you, when you put in your browse image from manuscript, you can retrieve articles, already published articles containing the same images. Here is the example how we years ago we spotted scientific cartoon published somewhere and then reused without permission on front page of a textbook on peer review. So it was immediately spotted by author and contacted. So it's also possible. Another example, one of the example I published about this story of plagiarism. Chinese authors, initially someone from Russia, Olga Baidik, published in a non-indexed journal in Russian something, and then Chinese authors contacted editing agency, asked them to help to publish article. That unethical agency probably stolen that Russian article and sold out after translation plagiarism, after rewarding, and published in PubMed Central Indexed Journal. Russian specialist who read that English article immediately spotted similarity with her article, and it was discussed by me, but by other experts. And you see that original, and here is original images, and somehow changed and grayscale images in plagiarized article, somehow similar identical tables also in original source and copied. So when we contacted the same other tables, I contacted chief editor of Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences, he claimed that the manuscript was checked initially, and only 2% of copying was detected by Authenticate. So, but we convinced that the editor-in-chief that this is blatant plagiarism, translation plagiarism, and unethical article, and it was retracted afterwards. And this case was also discussed with copy experts, other experts in research misconduct, and it was retracted. They later published this report as a case study. So even Authenticate is not something that can prevent plagiarism published in published articles. Lancet uses, and many other journals, established journals use, but the Authenticate software, its largest database with large coverage of literature, and this is why it's reliable in terms of detecting plagiarism. How to avoid plagiarism? There are some simple rules. Be honest, do not copy any print or published sources, and write original text in your own words. And when you write or refer to scientific ideas, always paraphrase and cite primary source. It's easy. Easy said than done, particularly for non-Anglophone or novice authors. Step-by-step advices. Do not copy verbatim anything. Write in your own words. When in doubt that it's not your idea, always find primary source, primary reference, and cite. Do not recycle graphics. Try to draw graphics figures originally. or if you adapt something, get permission, and you may avoid claims of plagiarism, accusations of plagiarism. Miguel Roig, top expert in plagiarism from US, he used to run blog, anti-plagiarism blog, and I quote his notion that always acknowledge contributions of others and other sources of others' ideas. Any verbatim copying should be put in should be placed in quotation marks, but particularly wordings of others, famous specialists, famous scientists, are put in quotation marks. And again, after quotation marks, you should also put reference to primary source where that quotation comes. In terms of global fight against misconduct, we emphasize mentorship by research managers. We emphasize training authors by using webinars like this one, like today's webinar. We also may reduce pressure to publish, because we live in the era of publish or perish, and it causes a lot of pressure on those who self-plagiarize, copy their own text or copy others' ideas and texts. Authors should be taught how to write properly, how to adhere to publication ethics standards. They should adhere to research reporting standards, guidelines from Committee on Publication Ethics. Particularly, journal editors may consult COP algorithm and may retract articles if they spot plagiarism in already published articles, and ensure harsh punishments of plagiarists, particularly intentional plagiarists. For self-recycling, we rely on Biomed Central guidelines, how we improve instructions in terms of our strategy to fight plagiarism. We simply improve or upgrade instructions. Here are examples from Lancet and Croatian Medical Journal, and I was involved in upgrading instructions of Croatian Medical Journal, and paid attention to anti-plagiarism strategy as well. Hope that all your journals in Central and Eastern Europe will be also upgraded, updated based on updated recommendations, and sections related to plagiarism prevention are important. How we can fight plagiarism? We can ask authors to add notes about previous publications, let's say Congress abstracts, or if it is an article by novice author students, they can be asked to add a disclaimer that no part of article is published somewhere. Journal editors are particularly advised to pay attention to review articles. So review articles should be processed cautiously. What else can be done by journal editors? Some journals, particularly in Europe, in Croatia, they have research integrity editors, even 2 editors for this index journal, Biochemia Medica. The same can be done by journal editors in Central and Eastern Europe, where many problems with plagiarism or research misconduct can be surfaced if journal editors pay more attention to processing of review articles, processing articles from non-Anglophone authors, etc., etc. So thank you for your attention.
Dear Armen, thank you very much. Now we know almost all about how to avoid plagiarism and academic dishonesty. Thank you very much. Could you provide more details how journals editors should act to prevent plagiarism?
Okay, so journal editors, what should they do? First of all, they should regularly revise publication ethics and publication malpractice statements. Without these statements, no any journal can satisfy indexing criteria of Scopus and Web of Science, and of course other databases as well, reputable databases. They may also invite experts in publication ethics to act as research integrity editors, given the example presented here, Biochemia Medica and many other journals, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe. Journal editors may also ask their reviewers to stick to COP standards for reviewing to keep confidentiality, to avoid copying ideas, and discard PDFs of processed articles after peer review. They, journal editors, may also pay special attention to review articles in terms of plagiarism. So these options are widely used, widely available, and it can be also helpful. So I'll discuss instructions for authors in a bit, later on today, as a final part of our webinar. So, and hope that our journal editors will start to pay more attention to plagiarism prevention by taking first step by revising their instructions for authors and instituting implementing or enforcing COP recommendations or other general other editorial recommendations.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the final item of the agenda, instruction for authors. Also, one of the most important item in scientific writing. Please, Dr. Arman.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to discuss. Finally, we now have opportunity to discuss how to work with journal instruction. This part of our webinar could be of interest to journal editors and also to authors who are going to choose good target journals. So first of all, to journal editors, what they should do? They should regularly follow publications in good journals, top scientific journals like Nature, Science, New England Journal of Medicine, and should pay attention to instructions for authors in these top scientific journals. Examples of these leading journals are quite helpful. Is there any association between top general medical journals and quality of instructions of authors? There was a study that didn't find any association. So even small, non-indexed or emerging journals may have high quality instructions for authors, even without impact factor. So journal impact factor has nothing to do with quality of instructions for authors. Instructions for Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine are excellent, perfect, not because of their high impact factor, but because of editorial credentials of those who contribute to these journals. So even small, non-indexed journals aiming to be indexed by Web of Science Scopus may have excellent instructions. So pay attention to your instructions. Each journal instruction should have a number of points, sections. So first of all, it is necessary to strictly define aims and scope of a journal, subject areas covered by a journal. If, let's say, a general medical journal covers extensively library and information science articles, it's unacceptable. So journal should stick to its own specific aims and subject of interest. So there should be a part about formatting, small part about how to format articles, how to adhere to Equator Network standards, extensive part about peer review strategy, single blind, double blind, public peer review, statistics of peer review, online registration and submission guide, how to submit via email, via online management system, or how, by sending letters, print letters, regular letters, or elsewhere. So research ethics considerations based on global editorial standards, also an important part of instructions for authors. Each journal instructions should include statement about authorship criteria, conflict of interests, how to disclose conflict of interest, which form can be used, let's say International Committee of Medical Journal Editors form, how the journal defines plagiarism, and which percentage or which type of plagiarism are acceptable or unacceptable. Zero is acceptable, zero plagiarism. Copyright and licenses, which copyrights are acceptable. Note that in the same journal, more than one types of Creative Commons licenses can be accepted. Let's say Creative Commons attribution license can be accepted, and also share alike license. So two types. It depends on publisher strategy. But there cannot be a Creative Commons license and closed or subscription-based license. This type of strategy is acceptable for hybrid journals publishing open access articles for gold open access model, and having the rest of the articles for subscription. We should rely on top scientific journals, and Lancet has excellent instructions for authors for the whole Lancet and for Lancet sister journals, because sister journals may have some specifics in terms of subject categories, in terms of authorship audience of these journals. I refer also to Croatian Medical Journal instructions for authors, very exemplary, because they cover also priorities. So instructions for authors should provide information about priority article types, priority items. Let's say journals may publish primarily large clinical trials, large evidence-based articles, top medical journals, top rheumatology journals, whereas some items, small letters in pilot studies are non-priority items, and most journals usually decline to consider to process this type of articles. So it should be written in instructions for authors. In instructions for authors, we need to have detailed information of peer review strategy. How submissions are processed internally and externally. Number of reviewers involved in an average article. Duration of first round of peer review should be listed, usually up to 21 days in open access journals, but the shorter the better, particularly in open access journals with online processing systems in place. So whether author-suggested reviewers can be involved or not, whether the journal relies on fast-track peer review system. Let's say Lancet has fast-track review system for clinical trials or other top priority items. And mandatory for all journals is submission and acceptance dates. These dates should be listed to help readers understand manuscript turnaround statistics. If too long, let's say 6 months, 1 year, unacceptable, and it suggests that it's not good target journal. For PhD candidates, the shorter that turnaround time, the better. We analyzed rheumatology journals, a sample of rheumatology journals, 44 journals indexed by Scopus and listed by Scimago Journal and Country Rank. It was an article published years ago. And at that time, we analyzed instructions for authors, whether instructions contained information about peer review type, single blind, double blind, public, whether public peer review is an option or not, average number of reviewers, whether statistical reviewer is involved or not, and the rest. And notice that not all with journals in their instructions for authors presented all information. So it's impossible to have comprehensive instructions for authors, but some pertinent points should be listed in all instructions for authors, particularly in journals aiming to be indexed by Scopus and Web of Science. Authorship criteria should be listed. Particularly, I emphasize once again importance of adhering to 4 authorship criteria, and these criteria should be listed and should be linked with primary source recommendations of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. And the most important part of authorship criteria is 4th criterion, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. We also attempted to analyze, and we published this report years ago, about authorship criteria listing by rheumatology journals. And notice that only a handful of indexed rheumatology journals were well updated. So not all updates were available. So authorship criteria were proposed in 2013. And at the time of writing this article, this report, in 2014, not all instructions for authors were updated in terms of authorship criteria. Instructions for authors should also contain information about conflicts of interest disclosures. It's an important part of editors' work. If journal processes information about drug therapies, medical technologies, all specialists, all journal editors should disclose their conflict of interest at the start. They should submit conflict of interest form. All reviewers should be asked to disclose their conflict of interest at the time of peer review. It can be done automatically by clicks in editorial management system. And of course, all editorial board members should also disclose any conflicts of interest related to pharma, related to stakeholdership in proprietary services, in pharmaceutical agencies, etc., etc. All these statements are well discussed in global editorial associations. Conflict of interest statements should be also presented in instructions for authors. First, should be defined what constitutes conflict of interest, primary and secondary interests of all stakeholders in scientific publications. Primary, let's say, service to profession, and secondary interest, links to pharmaceutical industry, promotional activities, etc., etc. We should also ask journal editors to list the most important Equator Network standard. Let's say if journal publishes case reports, they should provide link to CARE Equator Network standard. They should also have part about retraction, which items can be retracted, based on which grounds. We mentioned about retractions. Retractions can be done because of violation of authorship, conflicts of interest, lack of ethics approval, statistical errors, etc., etc., or because of plagiarism. And all these instances should be also listed in the part related to retracted publications. So I also analyzed retractions years ago again, and it was published in one of the best European journals, Croatian Medical Journal. And at that time, I was impressed that most retractions come from top, most active scientific powers like the United States. And in terms of journals, most retractions came from Nature and Science, because these journals pay attention to what they publish, analyze everything even after publication. So post-publication promotion is an important part of work, and it's a culture of editorial work. I'm sure that some of journals in Central and Eastern Europe now have social media editors. Your journal, Rheumatology also has its own social media editor, and one of social media editor functions is to promote ethically selected articles not linked to pharmaceutical industry. And this type of points should be also listed in instructions for authors. So I strongly encourage all those who are going to revise, upgrade their instructions, pay attention to social media promotion, to retractions, and particularly when they submit their journal applications to Web of Science and Scopus. Part of journal instructions should inform authors about copyrights. So gold open access or platinum open access journals often rely on CC BY attribution license. So all copyrights retained by authors. Primary publication is done by one journal, and secondary publication can be done elsewhere with permission with reference to primary publication. So it's one of the most liberal copyright license, Creative Commons license. So, and information about open access and copyright should be also transparently listed in instructions for authors. And it is also advisable to refer to, probably you remember about BBB declaration, Budapest, Berlin, and Bethesda declarations about open access initiative. So first part of that, these declarations dealt with author rights, and second part dealt with quality of archiving and permanent preservation of published items. Formatting part of an article is not as important as the rest, because nowadays formatting can be done automatically, but still some information about style guide, about referencing or citation, in-text citation is also useful to spare time. Most technical part also relates to DOI, digital object identifier tagging of references. So it also can be done. It helps to make your reference lists more functional. So journal instructions may ask authors to put DOIs next to each bibliographic link to help functionalize reference lists. So DOIs are integrated with ORCID IDs. Again, instructions for authors may include statement about mandatory or desirable listing of ORCID IDs of authors. So you see good examples how to list ORCID IDs. I know that some of Central and Eastern European journals also started tagging their authors by ORCID IDs. It's a useful strategy. Useful also to have information how to structure abstracts, particularly for journals that apply for indexing by Scopus and Web of Science, because these abstract and citation tracking databases are concerned with quality of abstracts. Some journal instructions may have a specific statements about common or their audience. Let's say in this case, DAF Press publisher provided a specific notice to Iranian authors who frequently target DAF Press, open access publisher, and mandatory also to have a statement about Committee on Publication Ethics. If a journal is a member of that association, they may put logo of the associations. Others may provide just links to their core practices standard. Now about publication ethics and malpractice statement. It may copy some of the journal instructions, but it has its own sections: author responsibilities, reviewer responsibilities, editor responsibilities, publisher responsibilities, and of course, links to editorial recommendations. So author responsibilities, what is required from authors? Of course, honesty, of course, originality of their manuscripts. They may be also asked to stick to data sharing requirements of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. So primary data of original research may be also published as a supplementary material. Reviewer responsibilities, they should keep the whole process of reviewing confidential. They should be experts when they in a field of interest. When they accept a review assignment, they should be good experts. They should also respond timely within 2 days to review invitation and submit their comment within few days, up to 7 days. It depends on journal instructions. And it is also desirable to include a statement about pablons. So authors may forward official acknowledgements from their publishers to pablons and ask pablons to record their review accomplishments. It's important, and more journals do it. More and more research institutions reward their scientists for review accomplishments. Editorial responsibilities, what is required from editors, handling editors or editorial board members. Let's say editorial board members may be asked to review at least 4 times a year, but sometimes even more. It depends on scope of interest of journal. Editorial board members may be also asked to submit solicited article manuscripts annually, 1 or 2, or act as authors and publish editorials. So all these responsibilities should be listed. Something new for journals is a section related to social media editors. So it is necessary to report in publication ethics part what is expected from social media editors. They should ethically promote selected, not all, selected items published by the journal, and should refrain from promoting drug therapies or medical technologies if they know that there is conflict of interest. Now, about all these statements, points, important for authors, and I hope that some of today's participants will become good editors. To me, exemplary or editors with good, excellent credentials are, of course, editor of Lancet, editor of one of the Iranian journals, who was consultant to Lancet, who is also quite active member of World Association of Medical Editors, Farouk Habibzadeh. He is past editor of WAMI, World Association of Medical Editors, and he is one of the ethical editors. So for me, also, moderator of today's webinar is also one of the editor with editorial credentials, and of course, chairperson of our webinar, Maria Mashlinska, is also one of the exemplary editor, and I hope that today's participants will become editors or editorial board members at some point and will learn lessons from all these exemplary editorial editors with editorial credentials. So take these good examples. About social media promotion, part of social media promotion was extensively discussed in a recent article by moderator of our webinar. No need, what is unacceptable in terms of social media promotion? Distribution of poorly validated or misleading information is unacceptable. So social media experts, social media editors should be also skilled specialists in the field of science, let's say in rheumatology, for rheumatology journals. They should not breach confidentiality of patients by posting their photographs. So even if they post sensitive materials, photographs from articles, they should avoid being dragged in social media discussions based on personal claims or based on insults. So they should stop being part of these small fights. So, and there is also acceptable strategy for social media editors and for social media promotion. Keep high standards of online communication, be accountable, be honest, and promote validated information, etc., etc. You may have, and you may provide links in your journal instructions and publication ethics statements. Here is example of good journal. You see top rheumatology journal with a number, with several social media advisors or social media editors. All of them are top scientists in their field, but also active users of Twitter, Facebook, other social media channels, and social media channels plays an important critical role in the era of open access and particularly in the era of COVID-19 pandemic, because we need information from vital information from social media channels, reliable channels for scholarly communication, particularly Twitter. And I hope all participants of today's webinar will join us later in Twitter and will promote their own articles, articles of their colleagues by putting tweets, comments on these articles, brief comments, brief statements, it's called also microblogging. And recently, Global Editorial Guidelines updated their recommendations and provided some points for relationships between scholarly journal and media. It's also quite important part of editorial work to be promoters of published items. So social media editors like Dr. Zimba for your journal, rheumatology journal, also are vitally important. Their tasks are to promote articles published in your journal and attract attention of interested authors who will use your validated articles without errors for citations in their own articles. We also rely on core practices from Committee on Publication Ethics, and again, it's important to update instructions for authors and publication ethics statements based on these merged statements, 10 statements. Of course, we may also rely on, I mentioned about global standards of International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, World Association of Medical Editors. These are vital sources for journal editors. And finally, about main educational or periodicals for continuing professional development of journal editors. These come from professional journals like Science Editing. It's a journal, official organ of Council of Asian Science Editors. Medical Writing is a journal of European Association of Medical Writers, and an independent journal, Publications. All these journals are covered by Scopus. So this is why these are important journals, and I hope that those of you who are going to become editors with editorial credentials will follow publications in these journals and will also attempt to publish editorial articles. So thank you for your attention. We covered all topics for this seminar, this webinar. My gratitude is conveyed to Maria Mashlinska, our chairperson and also moderator of our webinar, Dr. Zimba, for moderating our webinar, for covering all aspects, and for contacting our webinar participants. So thank you very much for your attention. Over to you.
Dr. Gasparyan, thank you very much. You generously shared with us your rich editor's experience. This is true because over the past 10 years, hundreds of non-Anglophone journals have been upgraded and successfully indexed by Scopus and Web of Science, thanks to Dr. Armen's contributions as a consultant. And I know that editor's instruction for authors is a very important point for evaluation by Scopus experts. Could you provide more details? How often should instruction for authors be updated?
Okay, well, both parts, not just instructions for authors, but also publication ethics and publication malpractice statements. These are two different documents. So both should be updated regularly. It depends on subject category. It depends on journal aims. So in my opinion, actively developing journals should revise or should pay attention to all points on an annual, in these both documents annually, should revise annually. Some journals revise biennially, so every 2 years they revise their journals, but on top of that, they should also put date of last update. It's important to inform Scopus expert evaluators, Web of Science journal evaluators, to know how often journal instructions and publication ethics statements are updated. So date of last update of these two documents should be somewhere, posted somewhere in these documents.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dear colleagues, let's finalize our today's webinar, draw some conclusions, and convey take-home messages to our participants. Dear Armen, Maria, who would like to start with take-home message?
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you very much. And dear participants, dear colleagues, I think that 2 days is this hard work, the hard work for the lecturer and the hard work for the participants, because I think all of the messages presented during this webinar is very important for us. Messages about the predatory journals, about the peer review, and the importance of our step into the proper writing of the reviews, original articles, also our comments. Because all of these fields of the research work, of the step into the research and presented of our work, is important to be visible. Proper writing and proper reviewing of this research is very important. Also, it's important for the reviewers to be visible the work of the reviewer on some platforms. You should insert our conclusion of our work as a review into the Pablons and the social media too, because sometimes we should point to good quality work and spread our work in this, because we also a participant in the final work as an article. And I think we should know that a lot of journals have a policy of proper writing. The policy as authors, we should know what is the authorship. Who is the author? This is, for me as an editor, it's a very important message from this webinar. And the next step, what is not only authorship, also we should know about the our research work on the material, human material, and about some bioethics, important bioethics aspect of our work. We not only we couldn't, we shouldn't. We have to remember about this. Maybe it's a more strong point of our work. Also, we have some other tools for be good researchers, as Sarajevo Declaration, as important messages from editors' recommendations, how to be an author, how to be a reviewer, and how to be a participant in research work. Also, the social media, I think it's a very important part of our not only work to exist. Yes, to exist in our world. As today we have a webinar. It's our webinar. I hope will be visible for the next time in some social media as Facebook, as Twitter, because I know that I hope it will be useful for the next time, and we want to come back to some aspect of the webinar. This is a good example to usefulness of social media, not only for fake news, but for good research and good scientific work. And I hope it for us and for me as an author also, and for my, not mine, but our rheumatology journal, because it's a journal of Polish rheumatologists, Polish Society for Rheumatology, and also for my institute, National Institute of Geriatrics, Rheumatology and Rehabilitation in Warsaw, it will be useful. And now we start the cooperation. Please enjoy us. Thank you very much, and thank you for great lecturer, because it's a good work and hard work, and I hope in the future we still will be cooperate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. Armen.
So Maria concluded and covered almost all aspects of our webinar. Thank you, Maria. I hope that all our participants, medics and non-medics, will use points of this webinar in their daily academic life, and will write good papers, target good journals, avoid predatory journals. Of course, it's a huge issue for the whole Central Asia and for Eastern Europe as well. So let's say this exemplary journal, Rheumatologia, Warsaw Journal, is a good target for all scholars who who want to publish in a good journal. So it can be an example of good journal and can distract all good researchers from predatory journals. So please, rheumatologists, target only journals like Rheumatology Warsaw, and you will increase visibility. I am very grateful to Maria for working on a Rheumatology Warsaw Journal, because she upgraded that journal over the past years based on latest editorial standards. And again, it was done to help research fellows in not just in Poland, but also in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, and probably in other parts of the world. We know she invested a lot energy, time, and resources on improvement, betterment of this journal, Rheumatology Warsaw, and it can be the best example for all other specialists. So please follow publications of this journal, submit, it's a message to all rheumatologists, participants of today's of our webinar, target this journal, improve quality of this journal, cite articles relevantly and ethically, and also comment these articles on social media. Dr. Zimba is one of the skilled specialists in social media. She also consulted many other rheumatology and general medical journals, improved their social media profiles, and we now rely on her support. So again, today's participants may also improve visibility of their own articles and their own journals by having social media editors, by promoting ethically articles on Twitter, primarily on Twitter, because Twitter is open channel for scholarly communication. We may also benefit from our webinar by acting more actively as reviewers and forwarding our official acknowledgements to Pavlos for improving visibility and reputation, scholarly reputation of our journal. So please act more as reviewers and be sure that all your accomplishments are credited somewhere. And you know that Pavlos, part of Clarivate Analytics, is one of the important steps towards Web of Science indexing. I mean, for getting indexed by Science Citation Index Expanded and joining Journal Citation Report. So we also need to encourage our journal editors to follow all latest editorial recommendations which we've discussed over the past 2 days. And all these editorial standards are important, again, not just for medics, but also for all other specialists. So we discussed ORCID IDs. Now it's a universally acceptable ID for all specialists, medics, non-medics, and it's also part of ethical publishing. If you have ORCID ID and if you proudly list all your accomplishments on ORCID ID, you claim that all your articles are ethical. So please have ORCID IDs. Please improve your scholarly searches through bibliographic databases like Scopus, Web of Science, Medline, PubMed, and many other specialist databases, again, which we discussed during this webinar. Hopefully, all your efforts will be rewarded by good quality articles, and you will increase your citations, your social media metrics, and you know that we live in a competitive world, and we need to increase our citations, social media attention, and not just to increase, to boost our metrics, but also to improve our career, achieve our academic achievements, and attract more new PhD fellows, new research collaborators. All our academic accomplishments are aimed to expand our research collaboration. So finalizing this part of our webinar, I'd like again to express our gratitude to all organizers of our webinar, to all those who followed us, who are going to continue our cooperation. And I am sure that our next webinar or seminar will have again the same number of participants, if not more, because this time we have more than 200 participants, and it's a huge work for our webinar moderator to coordinate and to contact all our members, to collect all their questions, to coordinate work between among us, among chairperson and lecturer. So thank you to all contributors of our webinar. Good luck and stay healthy. Thank you. Over to Alina.
Dear Maria, dear Armen, thank you very much for your support and contribution. And we wish to all our participants to target the best indexed journals. And we are waiting for your high quality and ethical articles after this workshop on scientific writing. And see you all on the next workshop or webinar. Thank you very much.